NFL draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's in the books. We have all 7 picks. Allen, day 3, didn't bring too many unexpected developments. Maybe the third lineman of the draft did. Mason McCormick, Ryan Watts, and Logan Lee are Pittsburgh Steelers. So we have the full draft class now. Interesting kind of takeaways from what they did do, but I think even more important takeaways from what they didn't do potentially. But let's just kind of start off with what they did do. Mason McCormick, 119. Really good value pick in terms of the player. I really like Mason McCormick. Thought he was a day 2 talent, athletic guard that can move out in space. You know, we don't see the Steelers do a ton of succession drafting, I feel like. Oftentimes we're talking about needs, immediate needs, but this one is clearly a succession pick where whether it's James Daniels, Nate Herbig, Isaac Seumalo down the line, that, you know, McCormick is going to slot in there at some point, whether that's next year or 2 years from now.
Yeah, I think this is actually the way you'd rather draft. The Steelers just haven't had the depth that you need to have to draft this way. And, I mean, I think it's questionable whether they had it here, too. Like, I think maybe we'll be looking at who they get at wide receiver eventually and say, oh, was it a good idea to take Mason McCormick? I think he's a very good player. That was the only pick to me in this whole process that didn't, really, like, immediately slot and fill a need. They didn't need to get a guard. They have, Nate Herbig, obviously very talented backup. They have Spencer Anderson with 5-position versatility. Dylan Cook played both tackle and guard last year, so they don't need that much help at guard. They do need a future starter. If they're considering not re-signing James Daniels, and obviously that's a 2-sided agreement, so they can't be entirely sure it's going to happen until it happens. And then also Isaac Seumalo will be a free agent in 2 years, will be an 11-year NFL vet. Could very well be the end of the road for him. So they do have that future need. This seems like the one pick here that was not focused solely on 2024. In fact, I would not be crazy surprised if Mason McCormick doesn't even dress in 2024. If you look at the way the depth chart plays out right now, I guess he would be the backup center. But, I think there's a lot of upside to the player. I think that is the one sort of off-the-wall pick that, like, when I wrote down who was available at that position, I even bothered to list a guard because I didn't think it was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we had talked about the possibility of it maybe being a thing, but it actually did happen. And McCormick's really fun in space. He's a mean player. You look at
crazy athletic.
Yeah, crazy athletic, experienced player that played at left guard for, a ton of games for South Dakota State. Every single game he played against top competition, whether that was Christian Boyd when he played Northern Iowa or when he went up and played, Iowa or whoever, was consistently good. He is a guy that is plugging kind of right there into that depth role, but has that future upside. He's a little raw right now, but again, they put him in a perfect position to kind of develop and nurture there. And I think also developing a clear identity with Zach Frazier, Troy Fatanu, and Broderick Jones. They're developing a really nice young nucleus here along this offensive line. It's a very athletic group up front. So not super surprised that they went all in on the O-line, but they might have gone even further than I thought they were going to go. So they got all 3 positions along the line, and I think, it's very possible that they're going to put 3 future starters along their offensive line.
Yeah, sometimes you draft a guy in the 4th round, he doesn't have that potential future starter upside. I do think Mason McCormick has that. We'll take it step by step. I think the big thing for him will be, can he replace Nate Herbig in 2025 as that top interior backup? And then we'll see. Maybe James Daniels isn't here, and then he'll have to be a starter, or maybe it'll be down the road. Moving on to the next pick, and it's funny that you mentioned Mason McCormick playing Iowa, because if you watch some of that tape, there's a little bit of Logan Lee in there, and that's the next pick, defensive tackle for the Iowa Hawkeyes. A little bit of an undersized guy, certainly has the length to play the position, 6'5", but he's a little bit undersized. Weighed in at 281. Now, he did play in the 290s, so he should be able to get most of that back pretty quickly, but a little bit undersized, but I still think an easy projection to be a traditional 3-4 defensive end. I think this comp has been probably overused, but I mean, Brett Kiesel was undersized, and that's kind of very similar looking player to me when you just look at the body type. Now the tape is a little different, not as fast as Kiesel, maybe not as explosive, but certainly I think is a guy who can be something to build with on that defensive line. A little piece of clay for Carl Dunbar.
Kind of came in as a tweener with how they used him.
Came in as a tight end.
Yeah, right. And he's kind of a tweener type. They used him a little bit, primarily over the B gap, but played him outside a little bit. Used him all along the line. I think this, Carl Dunbar kind of spelled it out very clearly. 5 in. I know he said 5 to 0. Don't really expect the 0. I expect this to be kind of, the Liao competition. I think that's kind of where we're looking here. He's going to be that Lowry's going to be the other 5, but who's going to be the backup 5? And him,
I think
Loudermilk.
Lowry and Loudermilk are clearly the kind
I
of
agree.
second 5 and 3, with Adams being the 0
nose,
to 0 to 4, right? You know,
And so Lee kind of slots in there. Probably less explosive, more quick, but he's got some niftiness.
that's a good way to say it.
He's got some nifty bend.
I like he's got some nice pass rush moves too. Like for a guy that doesn't necessarily, look explosive athletically, I think he has advanced, hand placement, and I think he has a good idea of what he's trying to do when he rushes the passer.
Wins a lot with the chop swim, the chop rip. Has some power upside, I think, too. Kind of with his frame, he's pretty long, so he can really get into guys' chests.
I think this is a guy with that frame too that you could put 25 pounds on him, no problem.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Right?
This is very much to me a project. They didn't need another body on the defensive line. They lost one guy from last year, Armin Watts. They replaced him with Dean Lowry. Now, different kind of player, but like this could very well be a redshirt year kind of situation for Lee, where they're going to put some weight on him. They're going to see how he develops, and then maybe they find an opening for him down the road. The other thing is, look, if he comes in and does well right away, this could be like looking at finding a way to trade DeMarvin Leal, because they don't seem to have a solid plan for how they want to use him. He's a very talented player, was a 3rd-round pick. They haven't done much with him so far. Maybe that's a possibility if they see an offer come their way for him that they would think that Lee is ready to go, that they would just use him as their last. And they still have Braden Fehoko there too. Very deep on the defensive line.
Yeah, they are. They have a few rotational guys. We'll kind of see where Logan Lee goes, but I think he has some pass rush upside to unlock. So I think that's an upside pick. And then the other pick that they had is a clear upside pick, Ryan Watts. I mean, you want to talk about a freak show athlete. That this guy at the combine put on a show in terms of what he kind of put up. He's 6'3", had a great test.
208.
Yeah,
I mean
40.5-inch vertical at
that's
208.
That's like me.
Incredible.
I mean,
that's an incredible vertical.
But that's a big guy.
Now, he only ran a 4.53 40, and his size, he's a little stiff on tape, so a lot of people have been projecting him into the safety. But throughout his college career, he's played outside corner, slot, safety. He's done a little bit of everything. I don't know exactly where the Steelers are going to kind of slot him in there. Maybe they should give him a shot outside and then kind of work him in. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of put him in as a sub-package dime backer type right away, where they kind of are going to try him out there throughout practices. But I'm going to be interested to see what group he works with on
Well,
day
I'll tell you
one.
what group he is definitely going to work with: special teams. They lost
that's
James
true.
Pierre from that unit. He's a very experienced coverage guy. Watts has played. He started at Ohio State before he transferred to Texas, was way down the depth chart at OSU, played a lot of special teams his first 2 years there, and then still continued to play special teams at Texas. So I think you're looking at a guy that could be in line to get a helmet right away, even if he doesn't necessarily have a defined role in the defense. I think he'll be competing in terms of that space with guys like Trenton Thompson, who are, I think that's more. I don't think he's real competition for like Trice and Rush.
Yeah, I agree.
I think those guys are outside corners, and that's what they're going to be. He's more of a versatile piece that could be inside, could be outside, could be safety. Definitely will be special teams.
It's fascinating because his shuttle times, the 3-count and the short shuttle, were all very good times. I do think you see some stiffness in his hip show up on tape, but the testing times were really good there. And then the long speed, you kind of look at it too on tape, and he can cover some range when he's back there at safety. He can go sideline to sideline.
He's a big man.
Yeah, he's big, and he's got great length.
Honestly, I feel like they could, if you're another guy, if you want to talk about a redshirt year, with that frame, you could turn him into a strong safety.
Yeah.
You could turn him into like a Terrell Edmonds type. Now I don't know if he can tackle well enough to do that. We'll have to see. That's a projection.
I think
I think it's all there for him. There's a lot of future potential paths for him to take.
I agree. I think, this is less about, say, going in the slot and covering slots, receivers, more than it is, all right, go up and get the tight end. That's where I think he's a tight end kind of guy.
Or the Debo Samuels of the wide receiver world, right? Where you have a big physical guy, Juju, right, that plays in the slot, that you don't want to have your 5'8" Mike Hilton trying to cover.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that's kind of where Watts kind of goes in there, but I think special teams ace is written all over his profile. So at the very least, even if he is a redshirt year, I expect him to get a helmet and play on special teams a lot this year, and they needed it. So he'll kind of bolster that unit. But let's talk about what they didn't do. Okay, no double down at wide receiver today, so it's just Roman Wilson from this draft. And really, Watts can, but really no slot corner. So I don't think I expected them to come out of this without a slot corner, but they don't have one. In terms of actual, perfect slot, this is a guy. They have a few guys, as we mentioned before, on the roster that can play in the slot. Guys like Josiah Scott, Thomas Graham, that are
Luke Barku,
like these lower level guys. Maybe they're going to give those guys a shot.
And then they have their 3 safety package, which puts KZ on the field with Elliott and Minka, and that can be a nickel as well. But they do not have that Mike Hilton, Art Millette, Shannon Sullivan classic slot corner. They don't have one of those.
Right. I think Scott is the closest you're going to get to that in terms of what you kind of look at traditional slot. And maybe they're giving these guys a chance, but I think, this is a pretty clear. We heard that they met with Cam Sutton earlier today too, that they are probably going to look to add a slot corner, whether that's Shannon Sullivan, Patrick Peterson, Cam Sutton. There's more guys that are out there.
Free agents out there. I've listed a whole bunch. Go check out the story I wrote at SteelersNow.com. But K'Wan Williams played here at Pitt as a free agent. He's an interesting guy. And there's going to be undrafted guys too. And look, Mike Hilton was an undrafted free agent. You can find an undrafted guy and plug him into that spot, and it's not crazy unrealistic, especially if you're going to do things like have Scott there or play your 3 safeties.
I think MJ Devonshire and Daquan Hardy went off the board here in the 7th round, but I think someone to really look at is West Virginia's Beanie Bishop.
Yeah, there you go.
I think that's a guy you would look at to potentially fill that slot role. But I think that's the clear kind of obvious move that's probably going to come here shortly.
And then wide receiver, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, look, I love Roman Wilson. I think he's limited to slot at least at the beginning of his career. Maybe he can develop into more than that. But if you're talking about where he's going to play in 2024, I think it's mostly going to be in the slot. And I don't think they have a player that projects to be that starting outside corner that you can put with George Pickens. I like Van Jefferson. I don't think he's that guy at this point in his career. I don't think Calvin Austin should be either. They need another player at wide receiver. And Omar Khan gave as close to a yes, I think, as we're ever going to get out of him for that answer. He said, look, we made the move to restructure Alex Highsmith's contract. We are open to doing that. We are flexible to do it, but we have to find the right deal. We've heard that they talked to the 49ers that they would not meet the price for Deebo Samuel. There's been less details about what's been happening with the conversations with the Denver Broncos and Cortland Sutton. We thought maybe that there would be some kind of move today that didn't materialize. I wouldn't think that that's off the table, though, at this point. We shall see. They did trade up. The Broncos did to get Troy Franklin from Oregon at the beginning of the the 4th round. So they're flush at wide receiver. They don't necessarily need to have Cortland Sutton around. I think there's still the potential for a trade there. Also, you wrote about the Giants maybe looking to trade a wide receiver also.
Yeah, Darius Slayton.
And they, of course, got league neighbors at the beginning of the 1st round. And there are still outside receiver free agents, right? OBJ, DJ Chark, Michael Gallup. There are still a bunch of those MVS. There are still a bunch of those guys out there. I think they will find a wide receiver. I think they will find a slot. I don't think it's – and then, look, they have the cap space to do it. I don't think it's even a really difficult projection. If they can do that, I think they set themselves pretty up about as well as they could, considering what they were working with this offseason.
Yeah, they need that outside receiver, and I think they need a slot corner. I think those are the 2 big needs. And, hey, we kind of gone through the gambit of guys they have added previously to these units. Linebacker was a problem after the draft. Let's hear Quan Alexander comes in. Slot corner was a question. All right, Shannon Sullivan comes in.
KZ.
Yeah. D tackle was an issue in Omar's first.
Larry Ogunjobi. Right.
So, they make these moves all the time. So I think we could probably expect them to make these moves and add someone to both these rooms and really strengthen this. Because after that, are there still some concerns? Probably, but are there many
it's about
holes?
as good as it's going to get.
It's going to get,
that was about as much as I could see them realistically doing. Maybe another running back with some upside. We'll see what they do in the undrafted free agent world. That could be a place they could look to add as well.
Yeah, it could be. But, I think for what they had in the draft, they did a very nice job of plugging their holes. They had a clear plan. Get the trenches going, be tough. I think it fits what Arthur Smith wants to do offensively. I don't blame them for having an offensive first draft. I think the big questions are now, okay, what happens in the secondary, wide receiver, and making sure that you put these rookies in the best spot because they don't get that wide receiver. I do feel like Roman Wilson's going to be in a really hard spot. He's going to be asked to take on probably more than he should at this point, and he can grow to a really nice player. I just think he needs a first year where, okay, things get better. And the Steelers have been pretty good about that recently where they, haven't thrown guys into the fire too much. Last year, they didn't really do that at all. Probably almost, and some people think they were too patient, with Joey Porter Jr. and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of what the plan is going to be. Add those rooms. And overall, Alan, I think pretty good draft. What's kind of your final thoughts on the whole draft?
I think they did about as well as I could have envisioned them doing. Honestly, I think they probably did better than I thought they would do. If I was going to give this draft a grade, I think I'd give it about a B+. I'm not in love with all of the day 3 picks. You can't be in love with all of them, but I think really the first and second day were as about a perfect as they could have gone, and I really think they filled the needs. They added major upside at positions of significant value like wide receiver and like tackle. And I like Peyton Wilson. I think it's a gamble on a player, but I think it's a good one to take, and I think they're in good shape here. I still think they're probably going to be predicted to be in the bottom half of the AFC North. There's a couple of more years worth of work to do to get this team to like championship status, but I think they've made a very strong statement that they're taking a step forward. They're trying to compete with those teams in the division right away, and they're laying the groundwork to do that.
Yeah, and they have an identity to it. I think I would give it about an A-. I like a lot of them, and I like the identity and value they got up and down the board. All right, next up on the calendar is going to be rookie minicamp in about 2 weeks. Probably, 2 weeks from now, we are going to be out there on the field.
Maybe right behind us. It's April in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it
so
might
very
be.
well could be raining.
It might be, but guys, thanks for joining us for draft coverage here. Obviously, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, comment, hit the notification bell. More stuff's coming. Afternoon Drive is going to be running strong and through there. All of the player interviews that we're probably going to get at rookie minicamp, they'll be here. We're going to continue writing content throughout the week, just recapping this.
We blew through 100 stories in the draft weekend at about like 8 a.m. today.
Yes, and we still have about 50 that we could probably write, and then more after that. So we will have you all covered there. For me, I'm Nick Faribault, Alan Saunders. Thanks for watching.